New fallout for Matt Lauer as more women come forward with sexual misconduct allegations against him. Also, new questions raised over NBC's call to scrap Ronan Farrow's explosive findings on Harvey Weinstein. Did the network know the piece might eventually lead back to Lauer? More on that in a moment. The Disgraced morning news anchor released an apologetic statement today, but disputes some of the accusations. He says there are no words to express my sorrow and regret for the pain I have caused others by words and actions. Some of what is being said about me is untrue or mischaracterized, but there is enough truth in these stories to make me feel embarrassed and ashamed. Repairing the damage will take a lot of time and soul searching, and I'm committed to beginning that effort. You know that. It's interesting. That's almost the exact same words that Al Franken used. You remember from last week?
Yes, where he doesn't necessarily agree with the women's perceptions of what happened. But yes, I'm sorry if I may have given you the impression.
But he does say that there's enough truth in them that the action that NBC took to fire him, I guess, was warranted.
Yeah, I mean, it was a finely written statement by an attorney or a PR executive.
Or all of the above.
Or all of the above.
And is he going to need an attorney, Kimberly?
Well, it sounds like it, but there was some speculation that he was in Hamptons and then meeting with a friend who was a criminal defense attorney, and it just depends on the nature of the allegations. If any of them are, criminal or assaultive or anything like that was without consent, an unlawful touching, so against somebody's will, yeah, then he could be in trouble for that, and depending on the, statute of limitations.
Reading the New York Times today, I thought I was reading Hustler. Not that I ever read it, but it's so graphic.
How would you know?
It's so graphic. Judging by that criteria, there's a case there.
Right.
Because this woman's knocked out. She had to go to her nurse. Remembers the situation. I mean, this looks like something you would see like on Law and Order.
Well, I think the bigger issue is for NBC. Because remember, NBC in the first statement says we'd had no prior knowledge of any complaint or violation of this kind. And then they have to issue a second statement in which says current management didn't have that kind of briefing, and which is, so they're backpedaling, Brian, rapidly. And I think that it's not so much, to my mind, that he might be in legal difficulty, although Kimberly says it's possible, but it's that the question of what NBC knew and when they knew it. To put it in sort of Nixonian Watergate.
Do you think that's where this story goes next, Jesse?
Yeah, the cover-up's always worse than the crime, and the NBC brass doesn't look so squeaky clean because yesterday they put out this narrative that they were blindsided by this, and they took decisive action, and there were no complaints. Now there were complaints. Meredith Vieira says that he kept sex toys in his office. Hoda and Savannah apparently knew a lot of this from reports we're hearing, but acted like they were totally unaware when they made the announcement. And Joe and Mika over at MSNBC said this was kind of an open secret. I know that's been a banned phrase here, but this was
okay. Gutfeld's away.
This was out there, and some of it was consensual, but a lot of it was not consensual. A lot of it was humiliating, degrading, harassment, borderline sexual assault, if these reports are true. So it looks like they have a problem because when you combine them spiking the Ronan Farrow Weinstein piece with them spiking the Juanita Broderick rape Bill Clinton piece and then basically protecting Matt Lauer for all these years, it doesn't look good for them. And they made $500 million in profits every year, and the ratings were great, and that entices people to cover up stuff like that, but it's a family over there. They say it's, the Today Show family, and sometimes you're pressured into keeping things in the family, and this is one of those examples.
So I think a lot of attention today on that famous picture of the two women hugging on the set. Because if what you say is true, and they knew, and there was around, I think Micah said, she's not shocked. Mika said she's not shocked.
Because he watches Fox and Friends, he does not know how to pronounce the name. Thank you, Juan. I appreciate that.
I'm a fan, bro.
Thank you.
So I think that there's also an issue about what we mean when we say consensual. Because what's consensual if the young woman is an ambitious young person at NBC, and you're talking about a man who's paid $20+ million a year, is the franchise, as you discussed, the money maker in terms of morning television in America, and management says, you know what, you don't want to go there. Maybe we don't want to discuss this right now. What does that say to that young person?
I can't touch that. There's so much. It's almost like the old rules. It's almost like we're looking back to like 1980s compared to if a star gets in trouble, we find a way to save that star, whether it's sports or entertainment or news star. When you make $23 million, I believe you're valuable to the franchise. Remember when Brian Williams made up those war stories? Those are like the good old days now.
It doesn't seem that bad.
Yeah, that's like he's probably on some level, even though he's friends with Matt Lauer, to some degree, although you watch Matt Lauer interview him after that, he didn't let him up for air, nor did he let Bill O'Reilly up for air at all. He was brutally, he was relentless in that interview. Knowing that this was in his closet is unbelievable in retrospect. But in the big picture, the next thing, when people say, what's next? Now you see Jake Tapper's the less than high-profile producer, he's gone. Okay, that's not necessarily next. What's next, I think, is going to be the management. There's going to be a gutting of the management of people who were playing by the rules that got them where they were today, but the rules say that this is a huge error.
What do you think, Kimberly, about the Ronan Farrow piece? So Ronan Farrow is an NBC Today Show fixture, and he had the Harvey Weinstein story. NBC said, take it somewhere else. It's not a story that we want to do. It comes out in the New Yorker, and then that actually is the spark that lit this wildfire.
I think that after you mentioned this yesterday after our A block, and we were talking about in the commercial break, it was
like things I should have said during the A block.
And that's what I said to you, Dana, why didn't you say that and make that point? So, but we're doing it today. I think it looks very bad for them because it makes them look like they were trying to do kind of a cover-up. They don't want to do a story like that. And then now they have their own kind of skeletons in their own closet, and it's such a big story. Ronan Farrow obviously was, telling the truth, and there was an effort there to try to not talk about any stories like this and not shine a light on their own situation.
We're not saying that we know for sure that it's connected. We don't, but it does raise suspicion. Meanwhile, pressure is mounting for Congressman John Conyers to step down over allegations of sexual misconduct. Top Democrat Nancy Pelosi is now among several members of Congress to call for his resignation today. That also includes Jim Clyburn, who just yesterday is reported to have questioned the accusations made against Conyers. This according to Robert Draper of the New York Times, who tweeted, also at this morning's House Democratic caucus, James Clyburn compared Conyers' accusers to the child murderer Susan Smith, who initially claimed a black man had abducted her kids. Clyburn said, these are all white women who've made these charges against Conyers. But today, Clyburn appears to be backtracking.
You said last week that you thought it was possible all these allegations could just be made up. Do you still believe that?
I never said that. Yes, that's what was reported. I said when you consider the source of these, just as I've seen the misrepresentation of comments I made yesterday, Breitbart or somebody's putting out a statement that I said that this had to do with white women filing a complaint against a black guy. That is absolutely not what I said. And the fact of the matter is, the young lady in question is African American, and I know her.
So, Juan, have the Democrats, for a week now, ever since Nancy Pelosi was on Meet the Press and sort of screwed that one up, and now a week later calling for the resignation, are the Democrats trying to get themselves into a place where they can all agree that these allegations are serious and that there should be consequences?
So there's so much to say here, but I mean, you have to put it in this kind of, one, Democrats are not united and not sort of, all of one party when it comes to this. And so what you've had is Pelosi trying to maintain relations with the senior member of the Democratic delegation in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Why?
John Conyers. Because you want to show respect to not only is he 88 years old, a senior member of the party and the head of the Judiciary Committee, but, Brian, you want to maintain relations with the Congressional Black Caucus, which was going to be especially protective of the man who founded the Congressional Black Caucus and is referred to in the black community, but also by Pelosi as an icon.
But Juan, would you also say this? Would you also say there's the right thing to do politically and there's the right thing to do personally? So if you listen to these women talk and you read some of these accounts and you close the book and you go, I got to go do Meet the Press, I got to be honest, I cannot back him anymore. It's a shame what I thought he was. He turns out he's not to be that, as opposed to, I better not lose the Congressional Black Caucus. Your first thing to do, I believe, is to do the right thing, which Kathleen Rice did. Kathleen Rice has been the hero of this entire thing. I believe she's a freshman, right?
Yes.
Freshman New York Congresswoman has spoken out on both sides against. She said she walked out of a meeting with Nancy Pelosi there because they weren't addressing the elephant in the room. That takes guts. Telling Senator Franken to step aside, that takes guts. Telling this guy, this icon, to step aside, that takes guts before anybody else was doing.
Listen, I think they are asking him to step aside. Dana and I were
talking. She did it right away.
No, but I think if you're talking about that institution, Brian, there's no getting away from the fact it's a house of politics. And what Nancy Pelosi wanted to demonstrate that she is a leader to her members, But also then, I think she screwed up on Meet the Press when she talked about questioning these women. The same screw-up that my friend Jim Clyburn made, apparently.
Well, she managed to alienate both constituencies, women and blacks, because at first she said the guy's an icon and raised doubts about the women. And you know the Democrats need women because they're a key constituency. Then she flip-flops and says he should probably resign, but she hasn't called for the white Al Franken to resign, so a lot of members in the black community see a little bit of a different standard there,
Wait
too.
a second. There's, you know, this is what actually Greg was talking about. It's such a huge difference between these cases, but you want to throw them in the same bucket. I just don't think that's fair to people.
Okay, well, I mean, there's similarities between both, to be fair. I mean, he has 4 Conyers accusations against him. 1 settled, groping, sexual advances, showing up in underwear. Franken, photographic evidence, groping, sexual advances. They are similar in the same vein.
But Kimberly, although when it comes to the law and sexual harassment, is that the women accusing Al Franken weren't working for him.
No.
Is that the key distinction?
Well, that is a key distinction because it wasn't something that was taking place, in the work environment where he was a superior to them or supervisor, et cetera. So no, it's still a completely non-consensual, unwarranted, inappropriate, and so that's what makes it so disturbing. You see people think that they have just free reign to behave in this way that is injurious to others and to women. But when you see the situation, too, of Conyers, and you see the situation with Franken, there is evidence to substantiate these claims. That is, can be independently corroborated.
Do you think that Conyers will resign by tomorrow?
Well, so Conyers is in the hospital.
Yeah, he's had stress-related
correct.
issue.
Yes. And so, as Kimberly said, this is an 88-year-old man under stress, tremendous stress. I think you have to stop for a second. I know, we don't often do this, but you just be sympathetic for a second. The poor guy's whole life has crumbled here because he is no longer going to be known as the founder of the Black Caucus or longest-serving member or a terrific representative of southeastern Michigan. He's going to be known as the guy who got caught up in this. And, by the way, to your point, Jesse, the real crime in the Conyers case is that he apparently used public funds to pay off this woman as hush money. That's the sin here. And we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Would you also say that we should give tribute to Harvey Weinstein for doing some great movies? I mean, if he's doing this for 50 years, if it turns out, you got to reshape. Bill Cosby's hysterical, but I don't know if I could put on an album again. I will say this: a third accuser a couple hours ago from Al Franken, this Stephanie Kempler from 2003, a long time ago before he was senator.